Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about leveraging analytics to improve your website. We have a special guest, our Chief Measurement Evangelist here at Google, Neil Hoyne, joining us, and he's going to talk all about how you can leverage measurement to better connect with your audience. And I know he's got some great tips up his sleeve. So stay tuned. We'll be back in just about 3 minutes, just to give folks a few seconds to get on. So grab your notebook, grab a water bottle, and we'll get started in about 3 minutes. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Civics Outreach Training Series. This month, we're talking about analytics and measurement and how to improve your website. Just a few housekeeping things. Make sure to add your questions below. There's a blue button. Make sure you add those. We'll be responding throughout and having a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I want to introduce Neil Hoyne. He is our Chief Measurement Evangelist here at Google, and he knows all things about measurement and analytics, and he has got so many great things to share with us today, and I'm so excited to dive in deep into the presentation. So Neil, thank you so much for joining us, and take it away.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. Out here all the way on the West Coast in California, where I've been with my family for, I think, since March. I think we're now on month 16 of this 2-week lockdown, but thrilled that I can connect with you all the way from here over VC. What we have for you today is, you may notice a difference in the title. Originally, the title of this presentation was Leveraging Google Analytics to Improve Your Website. Google Analytics being a great analytics product that we have for measuring traffic to your site. We decided to make a slight change to it. When we were looking at that product as a whole, there's certainly a lot to cover. 150,000 different reports and opportunities and things you could learn. But there were also some broader tools that we use every day here that we thought we'd spend some time introducing to you. Some things that are very simple and accessible that you can use today, even if you don't have a Google Analytics account or access to it. And then some also, we're going to talk about some cutting edge tools, things that are coming out in the future to give you a sense as to where measurement and data are going forward. So that's a little bit about what we have. A really quick background about me. What do I do at Google? I've spent almost, it's going to be a little bit over 10 years last April. During that time, working exclusively with our customers, with organizations, with governments to understand how they use data in their own life. So, taking all that data that we have, what do we know? We know that most groups, most organizations are only going to use data to make decisions about 6% of the time. So, 6 out of every 100 decisions that they make are going to be influenced by data. That's not a lot. About 50% of the decisions they make are going to be from just how they feel. 10% whatever your boss says, 10% whatever your colleagues say is the right answer. That's the world. And the reason why I bring this up is not to get you frustrated, but more or less to give you a sense of empathy to say, if you're ever struggling where you feel the people you work with or your organization is not data driven, know that everybody is struggling with the same challenges. But the upside is huge. At least when we look at it from almost a commercial side, if we look at it, because that's the easiest for us to quantify. Companies generally are able to see about $50,000 to $60,000 more in revenue and value and productivity per employee per year by improving that number. And we're not saying going from 6% of their decisions to 100% of their decisions, not even Google's at that level, but going from 6 out of every decisions to 7. So just one more. And so that's why we want to give you a portfolio of different tools and different things that you may have known about. We'll go a little bit deeper, things you may be surprised to know exist. And we're going to cover a little bit more than the Google Analytics product on its own. Also, I'm going to try to get us out as soon as possible. We will stay as long as you have questions. But I also know even though we have an hour for this session, we don't necessarily need to take an hour. So we'll only talk about for as long as things are valuable for you. Let's jump in because you're probably tired of looking at this title slide already. What's the first thing really that you need to know about that we're going to cover? Something that a lot of people don't know that exists. A separate search engine just for data. Now, a lot of people go to Google and they say, do we have data on this particular fact or figure or this trend in this economy or what's happening with COVID cases? If you look at that URL on the bottom, that data sets, just search data set search on Google and this will also pop up. This is a search engine designed explicitly for data sets. So if there is information that you need, where you're not willing just to look at a news article or someone else giving you a summary, you can almost start here and just use this as the basis for your queries. We search as Google searches other sites. So does this site. This is not simply Google data, but this can actually search data.gov. And to say, is there a particular metric? And it will give you the information, where it's provided by, what it's included. And we just start this because this is really what starts that creativity and that curiosity to say, are there already numbers out there that I'm looking for? And this is where a lot of people start, is just to say, I need to figure out what's happening in my world. And is this a metric or a site that I can start with? And so this is something just to tinker around with, just so you understand how much data is out there and in a really easy, accessible way. But we also want to talk about specific use cases. So what types of questions are people trying to understand? What are they trying to use data for? In this case, you may know that question. I'm looking for a specific metric. In other cases, a lot of people are just trying to understand what's happening in the world around us. How are things changing? And in the past, when we presented this, it was kind of boring because things were fairly consistent year after year. People joke that Mariah Carey song, All I Want for Christmas, that appears routinely at the same time, December 1st, it goes to the top of a lot of our search data. And in fact, these tools like Google Trends, where people look at this. But now during COVID, now as markets begin to recover and reopen, we're looking at this data closer than ever because it's allowing us to see what people are doing before we may necessarily see those patterns in our own lives. Now, this is one that we had earlier on. This, of course, we saw this trade-off right as the pandemic began in March of 2020, where all of a sudden people were more concerned about their job security than they were about vacations. We saw as individual markets began to shut down, we saw things like restaurant reservations plummet to the ground. And in fact, one of the ways you'll see this is because with Google Trends, you can literally search any trend, any behavior. What we generally do is we start with the same queries that we're interested in, not as a company, but as individuals. What's top of mind for you? What are you concerned about? And we use that to see, well, how does the larger population empathize or share those concerns? Oftentimes you can be in a bubble. When I'm here in California, I don't care about cold weather, but it's meaningful for other people. And so, but that's how we start those queries. And you'll notice, you'll see these pull downs in front of you. You can base it just on a particular geography, a particular metro area, past 12 months, the past 48 hours, if you want to see hour by hour changes of something. You can look at it historically, the past 5 years. You can look at things, the differences between web search and news search and image search to see if volume is different with people looking for different types of media. But this allows you to see what's happening in the world around us. Now, we saw here restaurant reservations plummeted, but of course, these slides have been updated. Here's how things are starting to look as of yesterday. Things are starting to recover. Things are starting to get better. But this is just where we begin and where we spend a lot of our work and our time, is understanding these patterns and behaviors. So if you haven't played around with Google Trends, not only is it something that you should explore, but the biggest thing that I can offer is always start with your own behavior, the things that you're searching for, instead of trying to group things into larger categories. We said that sometimes people, well, why is my iPhone doing this? Is Android going to do that? Those are trends that we usually start with. So always start with that plain language to just see how important it is and how it's changing. The other thing to note as well is that, very similar to that tool we started with, the data set search, we also have a team at Google News that assembles and packages some of this data up as well. So for things that are really important, we actually have a site on GitHub where we will export all of the raw data. So for things like COVID-19, but as well, we see that with elections or issues like Brexit, we will aggregate all of that trend data so that you don't need to use a user interface. So sometimes this is not only good if you're looking for a particular piece of data that we may have available historically, but also it's sometimes to say, well, these are the things we're seeing on our side that are worth paying attention to. And these all will just give you interesting ways. One of the best places to actually see what other people are doing, there's a lot of writers at the New York Times that actually analyze this data and find some of those patterns. And if you look at over the past 5 or 6 years, they've had some writers that specifically look at different trends. When do Americans look for dating websites versus when are Americans looking for cars? When are Americans looking for dinner reservations and pizza? It's usually 3 o'clock and not 5 o'clock when they start making their plans. And we also take a lot of inspiration and curiosity just from some of these data points. In this case, when we talk about just general query level curiosity, people were searching loss of smell. And it turned out that there was a strong correlation to the number of positive COVID cases in those geographies. And it wasn't anything, we weren't searching, well, how many people are searching to do I have COVID? It was just, again, that common language, the things that other people were experiencing to say, how is this changing in different regions? And does it connect and does it correlate? And so anything that you're interested in, whether it's specific policy matters or not, is you can put that to say, is there awareness? Is there interest? And we'll do our best to show you how that changes throughout regions, how that's changed over time. And so that's really the first tool that I wanted to put into. It's one that it's been around for years, but a lot of people almost forget about it, but we always start there. Start at a very high level macro view. We go from the very broad data sets all the way down into, let's look specifically at trends for regions and for interest. And now we can actually go one level deeper to say, well, who's listening to your message? Who's going to your website and what are they doing? Now, as I mentioned before, a lot of data inside Google Analytics, and it can be overwhelming for some. One of the most powerful reports in this space, though, is the real-time report. Now, why do we use the real-time report? Well, we use it because with Google Analytics reports, there's often a lag in between when we capture the data and when we report it. There's a lot of processing that has to happen on our side. But we also know that a lot of organizations say, look, if something happens in the news, if there's a press release, if there's a new initiative, if there's a new vote, if there's anything where we want to get immediate feedback, do people care? Are people interested? This is the easiest way to understand it. It's a report that almost anyone can gather around and say, we are capturing people's attention. You can't see those people going to your website, but you'll see that interest. Now, granted, I should have picked a more popular website. I'm using examples from the Google merchandise store here. There's only 8 people that want to buy a t-shirt from Google when I took this screenshot. But for a lot of organizations, you can see those patterns and those changes. Are you capturing people's attention? What we also like to use this report for is this is what brings other people in the organization around the data and the analytics. It's not really exciting to look at a static report. Nobody wants to open an Excel spreadsheet or look at a sheet of paper. So what we often see is organizations will put this real-time report in a prominent area, whether it's a break room or whether it's in their lobby, so that anybody walking by can see the web traffic on their site and see how it changes. It gets them interested. They see the responses. They start to ask questions, why, and they start to be comfortable with the tools like Google Analytics or their other data packages to say, this is information that I'm interested in. And they can start to ask questions where you see those active pages. Those are the pages people are going to in the site. So if you had a press release, are you driving more traffic there? If you were to scroll down in this report a little bit further, you'll see top locations. And you'll say, all right, well, where are these people coming from? Are we reaching the areas that we hope to? We can drill down all the way to the city level to see how those are changing and how those numbers are aggregating by the minute. And again, the specific insights that you'll pull out of this report, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of depth, but it will give you a sense of impact. So if we were in real life, you'd see the number of people that are gathering around you waiting to hear your message. Here's the proxy to that in the digital space. And so if you want other people in your organization to join in on the conversation, to be part of this discussion, this is the way we do it, just from this basic type of report. Now, everything else from Google Analytics just allows you to get additional depth into those questions. So what are some of the things that we look at? Now, within the normal reports that you could use, you can look and say, what channels are people coming from? So there's a report, traffic sources, that will tell you, are people coming from email or paid search? Are they coming from Facebook? Are they coming directly to your website, or are they searching from Google? A lot of those stock reports are there. There's also a lot of classes and tutorials we can walk you through that will give you an understanding of them. But I also want to highlight a few reports that you may not know about that may give you some additional ideas. Like, oh, we should probably check this out because they're overlooked. So as one example, we actually break down and we take some of our network level data to help you understand more about your audiences. So affinity categories is that when we look at the aggregate, all these anonymized signals that are happening on the internet, and we look at your audience, we can give you a sense as to things that are top of mind for them. So value shopping, they're interested in saving money. They're interested in movies. They're interested in technology and music. Hundreds of these categories allow you to get a profile to say what other messages and complementary content may resonate with these people. If they're not interacting with you and your site, what else is top of mind? And how do these change over time? Are they interested in cryptocurrencies or banking at one time? Are they interested in just getting outdoors and traveling? It allows you to see how that's changing. The in-market segments, which you see on the right-hand side, follow almost similar categories, but there are more things that they're interested in right now. So affinity, who are they? General interests and categories. In-market, what's top of mind for them? Now, very similar to that earlier Google Trends report that I pulled, this one you see here was actually one that I pulled back in March of 2020, where we saw people were top of mind. Employment, finding, keeping a job was top of mind more than any other thing that they were looking for on the internet. Their next action, the best we could determine it, was not moving or buying a car or traveling or any of these other things you see on the list, buying a new phone. It was jobs. Can we have that job? And these types of reports give you a sense without directly asking people, are they interested in it? And how are those audience segments changing? Now, you only see a small portion of the report here. If you were to access it, this is why the little link is down there at the bottom. You want to go to interests and overview. It also allows you to segment that data. So you can segment it by data to see, well, how does that change over time? But you can also segment it to say, what if we just want to look at a particular area or a particular group? Maybe you're not interested in the entire country. Maybe you're just interested in a single state. You can look at that, or you can say, how do states differ? So perhaps we need to target our messages in new ways. That's where this report is valuable. And this is where you can extract a lot of information from it. The next report that I want to surface, again, these are just overlooked reports out of the 150,000 that are worth looking at, is this report called the Search Query Report. Takes a little bit of setup to get going. Why? Because you need to connect it and we need to verify that this site is you. For security reasons. But what it allows you to do is to say, how are people finding you from Google? Not just that you're seeing traffic from Google, but people are coming in and saying, this is how I ended up on your site. These were the queries. These are the words and language that I'm using. And why is that important? Not only can you look at changes in demand to say how people are finding you, you'll be able to assess from these reports where are you competitive. You may think people are looking for you. We may have thought, people were looking for Google stickers. They're really nice stickers, but we may have thought that would have been more popular. But it's not top of mind for other people, and they're not clicking through on those terms. And we may find that not only are people coming from Google, here's the terms that they're finding us on, and here's the language that they're using, how they're searching for it, what they're typing in. It may surprise you that nearly 20% of all the queries that we see every day on Google are brand new. We've never seen them before. And this starts to give you that report and that insight. And again, it could be a little bit more fun if we had more traffic on the site, but you can see all the way in the bottom right-hand corner by those left and right arrows that we're bringing in, 23, wow, that's a lot, 23,000 different search terms. And you'll see this robustness and you'll see this change. But this is almost like saying, well, why are people finding you on Google? What language are they using? How are they connecting? And where are your expectations? Content you put up and you thought you'd be connecting with people, where is it falling short and may not be as popular as you thought? So now instead of just looking at Google or ranking or typing your own name into Google, this allows you to go one of those levels further. Now, with all this, there's a lot of reports, and we always look for your feedback and question. If there's a report that you're seeing on this left-hand side on a lot of stuff, and you're curious about it, but you can't find it, drop us a note, and we'll point you in the right direction. If there's a question you want to answer to say, well, I wonder how could I find this particular information about my website customers? Let us know, and we'll do the best to point you in the right direction. There's certainly a lot of materials and content online, but I realize it can be overwhelming. You may have a single question. You don't need a 40-hour training. But let us know how we can bridge that gap of what can be a complex tool into very simple, actionable tidbits similar to what you saw here. So a lot more that we can provide here, but just from the Google Analytics side, I wanted to give you a high-level overview of some of the reports to check out, some of the things to start with. And probably the biggest request, this is just one last note that I have when it comes to this analytics stuff, is don't forget to set up goals. If you're new to this, what's a goal? A goal is saying these are people on our site that did something that we wanted. For some, it's submitting their information, signing up for a newsletter. Others, it could be making a donation, could be some type of other action. In this case, you see someone buying from an online store. The reason why goals are so important, and we're surprised at how few people actually utilize them to their full potential, is it allows us to pull apart this traffic a bit more. So when you're looking at that previous report, all the incoming search queries, it's going to be from everybody that came to your site through Google. But sometimes there's a question to say, look, this is great. I'm glad I can see everybody, but I really want to see the people that want to get involved and filled out this form. Then that form becomes your goal. And it means in almost every report that you go through in this tool, instead of looking at all your traffic, you can look at the traffic that matters most. So you can say for the people that were filling out this form, that were signing up for more information, that were participating in this program, downloading this guide, this is where we're getting that traffic. And it filters out a lot of that noise. Absent goals, which is, again, the case with most people, without those, you have to just see traffic as a whole, which makes it harder to say what's really moving the needle for you. And so make sure you can set up multiple goals. You don't have to get agreement to say whether it's A or B, and you can have multiple in the account just to look at the differences. And that will, again, give you a better sense as to, are you reaching the people you want to reach? Are those people taking an action you want them to take? And so this is a missing piece that makes everything work. Now, that doesn't complete everything that we're talking about with Google Analytics. There is one additional piece to it, is we often have a question to say, are our metrics any good? We received 1,000 people to our website. Is that a lot? Is that enough? We have an email list of 10,000 people, and we know our own click-through rates. Is that good? We have 1 million social media followers. Other organizations have half of that. Is that great? We feel better because the number's higher. There's a part of Google Analytics that helps to address this question. And this particular part of Google Analytics can be accessed even if you don't have an account. If you just want to look at the raw numbers, they're there. And what it's called the benchmarking reports. So what do the benchmarking reports do? Well, very similar to their title, it allows us to take a lot of information. People that opt in and agree to share their information in an aggregated, anonymized way, we can then build into categories to say, how are other people doing? How much traffic are they seeing? Where's their traffic coming from? How engaged is their traffic? And how is that traffic changing over time? So here's what it looks like. This is one view of the report. In this case, I grayed everything out just because you'll see green and red numbers on your own reports. But what you're seeing here is we just built a very simple report to say, where are people coming from? Where are other peers, other peer sites? How does my site compare to them with where I'm getting my traffic? So referral traffic is the strength that people are coming from third-party sites, news sites, affiliate sites, messaging boards. Are they coming from someplace else? Other people sending me traffic. Direct. Do they know the name of my website? They typed it in, google.com. They typed that in. Do they know who I am and they came directly to me for information? Organic search, that Google query report. Did they find me when they were really trying to answer a question? They didn't know where they're supposed to go. They come from social media. Display, paid search, other advertising. If you have paid campaigns, they'll appear there. Email. How many people click through my email? And what you'll see is across all these categories, acquisition, how many sessions did people come in? How many new users? How many pages did they visit? How long did they stay? How many of them got to my page and immediately left? And you'll not just see your numbers, but you'll see how they compare with other peers. So that gives you a sense to say, are you doing better or worse? Now, the question, of course, with a lot of people is to say, well, what's a peer group defined as? Because this kind of matters. And so this is almost what it looks like. This is the actual pull down that you'll see, just a snapshot to show you how granular these peer sets get. If you were to look at the proxy, if you look at automotive, we can actually get down to Toyota versus Ford dealerships. But this will give you a sense. It's just some of the categories, or several thousand, where you can view the individual peer sites. You can search for specific things like campaign elections, and you can also specify size. So that way you're not comparing yourself with a site that gets a lot more traffic. You're saying for people that are relatively my size, that are in the same space, how are they doing and how are they engaging with people differently? And then that gives you the inkling to say, well, do you have a high social media following, but it's not engaged? Or is one of your assets the fact that a lot of people read and engage with your email content? This finally gives you a little bit of guidance as to where to check your efforts. And if you're ever curious to say, well, how many people are actually in the site? How many sites exist that are between 1,000 and 5,000 visitors per day that are in campaign and elections? Are there a lot? We will tell you how many sites are in each profile. If we don't have enough, I think the threshold is 10 sites. We won't surface it. We'll tell you that as well. But that way you know how many people you're comparing it to. There's also a form that I didn't put up there, but you can also narrow it down by geographical area. Obviously, you'd want the United States, but you may want a specific area. You certainly have those capabilities. But this is a report that you can access directly through Google Analytics. If you do not have access to a Google Analytics account, or you're not comfortable with your data, or you're using other tools, we can also send you a link to a demo account. You can find it if you search for Google Analytics demo online. When you load that, you'll see the Google merchandise store, some of the same data that I've been using in these screenshots. But it will also allow you to view the benchmark reports. Now, those benchmark reports won't have your data in them, but they'll allow you to see how your peer set, however you define it, is actually performing. So that's a second area, part of Google Analytics, but worth covering because it just gives you a sense to say, can we go a little bit further? All right, but now we want to go a step further, is to say, what about everything we're missing? What if you have a question that you want to ask about, but you don't have data on it? And we did this. We had this silly example from a couple years ago where someone was asking about this House resolution. What we actually do is we have a tool called Google Surveys. Now, Google Surveys is what it is. I don't like promoting tools just for tool's sake, but this one's really awesome. Here's how Google Surveys works. I'll give you a sense. This is what the full interface looks like. What Google Surveys does is it allows you to ask a question to the internet. Any question you want. And we try to get the results back to you within 24, 48 hours. Those questions are about 5 cents a respondent. So you can get a statistically valid sample size, usually between the range of about $75 and $100 in most cases. You can target it to say, we only want to reach people in this particular area. We can target it only people that have been to my site or people that meet particular age, gender, demographic characteristics. And you can ask them what their opinions are. These questions can be, have you heard of something? It can be, what's your opinion on it? It can be open-ended. It can be, what's top of mind for you? But what's great about this product is it starts creating that communication. It starts going beyond those reports and saying anybody in your organization can be curious about how people feel. And now you can get an immediate response that's backed by data. So if you find yourself in a meeting where you're at that 6% of decisions are going to be made using data and people are asking, they're saying, we don't have any data on this. It's not in Google Analytics. We just came out with this plan, this package. Have people even heard about this effort, this initiative? Now you have a path to say we can go and collect the data. And for a lot of organizations, what we work with is because the price point is so low that what they'll actually do is they'll rerun these surveys weekly, sometimes every day, to see if their outreach, if their marketing activities are leading to a change. Sometimes they'll use it for testing creatives. Here's 2 different versions. Here's 2 different messages. How do you feel about it on a 1 to 10 scale? Almost any question you can ask through this platform. We're going to manage everything on our side to make sure that it's unbiased in terms of who's responding to the questions and how we engage them. But that's an option. And also, in full transparency, there are other companies, I believe SurveyMonkey is another one, that offer similar products. Whoever you go with, I just want you to have this as part of your arsenal. You're not limited just to the data that you have. You do have the ability to reach out and get really quick responses to questions. Before these tools came out, we were always limited even internally to larger studies. It took a month, it took 3 months, it required a separate firm to do it. Now anybody can log in and just create a question and start to get a sense as to what's actually happening in the world and where they're making an impact. So that's the last tool that I have for you there. Just a few more fun little things to toss out. Of course, we have a lot of questions where people say, well, are we using the right approach to reach people? Lots of tools. I have 2 more. This one is just a basic testing framework. It's called Google Optimize. It's free. It works really well with Google Analytics. There's other ones out there like Optimizely that are great too. But you want to have this in your toolkit. Why? Well, similar to some of those questions we mentioned, when you go through this data and you look at your Google Analytics reports, you're going to have hypotheses. So going back to that search query report, you're going to say, well, people came to our site looking for this language. Should we change the button to reflect this language? Should we change the imagery to reach out to these people more? Should we change the headline content? Well, sometimes this can be difficult to answer because you have a hypothesis and you go and you just change the website and then you have to wait a couple weeks and see what works. And do you have confidence and the market changes? You get the idea. Tools like Optimize take out a lot of that work. What they allow you to do is they allow you to segment and say, here's what I want to change. And what Optimize will do on the fly is it will serve one person the new version. It will serve another person the original version. And when it's done this for enough people, it will come back and it will tell you what it thinks is the right answer based on what it's seen. And again, you'll define the goal. Is it you simply want someone to stay on that page? Is it you want them to click? Or if you set up those goals, what language drove people to that goal faster? And so that gives you a little bit of clarity on it. Now, of course, with experimentation, there's a lot of different things you can test and a lot of different ideas. One thing I just thought I'd put in front of you to kind of get you excited and get you involved in this process is we actually came across a study. I'll admit it was for retail and travel advertisers, but it's still incredibly fascinating. What they did was they looked at, I think it was close to 680 different studies and said, out of all the things we could change on our webpage that led to people doing more of what we wanted, what made the biggest impact? And you'll see all the way on the bottom, they found some things like, well, let's make our site compatible with mobile devices, mobile navigation and mobile search. Let's add links so that people can view all press releases, a link to say, hey, let's go back to the top. Let's change our call to action. So a button to say donate to give. Can we make navigation a little bit easier? Can we change buttons and how they look, pop-ups? We can send out the pay for you want to see it. It's phenomenal. I think it's also linked. It's on my LinkedIn page if you look at it, where they'll describe what every intervention was. But the ones that ended up coming to the top were things that reached people personally, that drove that connection. Scarcity and urgency. Messages that say, well, people need to compel to act. Would it surprise you that when researchers have looked at expiration dates on offers, specifically they were looking at coupon codes or gift certificates that they were giving out for French pastries, when they made longer deadlines where they gave people 3 months to redeem a particular gift certificate versus 2 weeks, fewer people redeemed it. So even though people had more time, fewer of them took advantage of the offer than when they were told that they had a short period of time. That may be surprising. It was surprising to the researchers because before the study, they asked everybody when they gave them a gift certificate, what's the likelihood you'll redeem this? And the people that only had 2 weeks, said, not likely. It's a short period of time. People that had 3 months, definitely, I'll do it. And then when they looked at the results, it was the opposite. The people that had shorter amount of time that were pushed and said, look, this is going to expire. They actually took advantage of that offer a little bit more. And so this is really just to give you a guidebook to say, if you're looking at improving your website, improving your performance, there's a lot of data and a lot of research that's been done that says these are kind of things that will work. What you have in front of you with all these tools so far is it gives you a sense to say, well, now you can observe your site to say what people are doing. And now our challenge to you is to provoke you to say, what do you think you could do better? What could you improve based on some of the basic data that you see in front of you, either reaching people that have different interests that are coming to you in different ways, or just taking hold of just the way people behave and saying, are there things we can do even better? And again, this is another area of collaboration. If you ever have any questions on it and you're just curious, well, what seems to work with these types of messages or these types of surveys, let us know. Because there's a lot of weird and provocative studies. Instance, another one, when people send out surveys, most surveys follow questions in a very neutral way, right? Did you love this or hate this? Negative way, what are things we could improve? There's even research that found that when people ask a positive question in front of it, so they start their research by saying, what did we do for you last quarter? Why do you like our organization? Even though all the other questions remain the same, just prompting people to think about what you did for them actually changes the way that they interact with your organization going forward. Now, the way these tests were run were for commercial organizations, retail, B2B, banking. But they found out just on the retail side, they found when they asked people to think about what they liked about a purchase, those people went on to spend 7% more with that retailer over the course of the next year. On the B2B side, when they asked people about free trial products and said, would you get the paid version? 34% more people actually signed up for the paid product when they were asked halfway through their trial what was going well for them. And the same thing with banks. When banks asked and said, well, how are we doing for you? Are you happy? What do you like about our bank? When they looked at those people 18 months later, the customers that were encouraged to think about the things that went right instead of the things that went wrong ended up using more products, having higher deposit balances, and actually reported greater levels of satisfaction with that bank than people that just received the exact same survey with one question less. And so a lot of what we do try to understand the data that we have, but we also want to say, well, how can we actually apply it? And testing is where that happens. Testing is the intersection between the two. Everything that you've been doing so far, starting with that hypothesis, and then saying, well, if you see this behavior, what could you change to reach and engage with people in a better way? And so these are just a few examples, a few kind of funny ones for you. I hope you enjoy them. The last area that I want to cover here is really that forward-looking area. Now, this is an area if you're curious about and want to get involved with, absolutely, we have plenty of resources. I'm going to cover it just from the high level to let you know that it's possible. But more and more of analytics is shifting to prediction. Saying instead of looking back and saying, these are the people that came to our site a month ago or a year ago, they're starting to predict and say, based on all the signals that we have, all the information that we have, what do we think is going to happen next? How many people are going to come to our site? What are they going to be interested in? How many people are going to donate? How many people are going to get involved? This is the intersection of machine learning. Machine learning takes very small pockets of data, sometimes very large pockets of data, and says, can we predict an outcome? If I were to look at 10,000 people and you say, here's what we know about 10,000 people, and here's what those 10,000 people did. Here's the goal that they completed. Could machine learning predict when we see that next individual customer what they're going to do? What's going to happen to them? And what's important? Now, we spend a lot of time in areas, this one area of customer lifetime value, which is popular, especially when we look at donations and being able to say, can we actually segment out individual customers and say, these are the ones that are going to be really valuable and these are the ones that are not? We see these differences. So oftentimes we see this Pareto rule, 80-20 rule, where we see about 80% of the value for an organization, for an effort, coming from 20% of the people. And in this case, the goal was simply transactions. Goal is transactions. Do they spend? And if we had an answer to that question, then we know what to optimize for. We know the people and the signals that matter. Now, machine learning is a complicated area, and there's a lot of deep research going on. It's driving things, especially like self-driving cars. But what we're also seeing as a class of tools emerge. One that Google offers is called AutoML. That is really becoming drag and drop. Now, in the simple interface, and again, there's a lot to this tool, but I'll give you the basics of what you're seeing. What you're seeing is a spreadsheet, just a spreadsheet of data and saying, here's the columns that we have on our customers. And then one of the things we have, so you can see this right in the middle column, target column. What's the thing you want to predict? We want to predict if they're going to get involved in this action, if they're going to donate, if they're going to sign up, whatever that action is. Just what column says the output. And that's all you set, and you click the button, blue. And what we do is we take all that data and we say, can we build a prediction that you could use going forward? Do you have enough data capture where we can predict what other people are going to do? So all that really inaccessible to things, recommendation engines. What are you going to buy next? How much are you going to spend? Now we see this type of technology being commoditized. So that if we were to get together in 3 or 4 years, it's likely that we're not going to be looking at historical reports at all. A lot of companies aren't. They're saying that we can't look backwards now, especially with COVID, and saying that the numbers that we had last year are going to compare to anything this year. Different times, different behavior. So instead, they're looking the other way to say, do we have enough data so that we can predict what we think will happen next? And if we know that prediction, we know our urgency and we know how to course correct. We're going to get a lot of people involved or few. There's a lot of people interested in this subject or not many at all. And what's the limits of the amount of influence and change that we can affect? And so this is an area, again, I just want to put on your radar. The only thing you need to know about this area, of course, you can dabble with the tools, but I'd encourage you just to think, and this is something that will be a longer term conversation, and we can do a standalone session on it, is just think about what questions you'd like to predict. What could somebody answer for you that would change the way that your organization, that your group is behaving or interacting with people? What would be that question you'd want to answer? Start with those. We're here to plug in all the technology gaps. You don't need to share data with us or anything else, but just to get you the tools so that maybe you could see if you could get a better prediction as to what people are going to do. So we've gone from the very high level of talking about basic search engines for data sets, covering things like Google Trends, reports you should look at in Google Analytics, benchmarking reports for what other people are doing, asking questions with Google Service. Hell, here's the entire list. This is everything we covered. All the individual tools, things that you should know about or things that you should explore. And again, with all of these, we're happy to provide additional depth and context. I think the greatest thing that we can offer here is just letting you know that these capabilities are out there, to let you know that these types of questions can be answered and that some of these reports are already at your fingertips. They're all here. And something that I glossed over, I actually thought as we were talking, this is in the wrong order, but we'll go back a slide. Best thing that you can do is to start with that question. What is that hypothesis? What are you looking for? The worst thing, don't jump into any of these reports. Don't jump into surveys or analytics and just do this thing. Well, I want to see what it says and what jumps out to me. You'll see bizarre things. Why is traffic high in Brazil? We don't know. But start with that question. You want to understand, are we successful in our email outreach compared to other organizations? Are people finding us on Google search for the things that we thought we were offering them? Surveys, you may say, are our messages resonating with the people we expected? Are we making a difference week over week, day over day? Those questions, start with those very questions, and then it's very easy to fit the tools into them. And if there's a question you don't know how to answer, come and reach out to us and we'll tell you the best tool that we have. But start with those questions. Start what you really want to learn and what would make a difference in your efforts. And then the tools will fall into place. Some will be really valuable, some you can skip on. And again, if you have any questions about it, this is where we are. We certainly have a couple minutes for your own questions here, which I know Maria will pass back and forth in the QA. But at any time, you can reach out to us, you can reach out to me, send me a message. Let us know how we can help you. Because we realize that even though people are using data 6% of the time, if we can get you to that 7%, then that's going to be a really awesome result. So thank you for your time, your attention. For any questions you have, Maria, welcome back. It's good to see you. Questions that we can answer.
That was phenomenal, Neil. I learn so much every single time I hear you present. I learn little tidbits and knowledge. So that's something that's extremely helpful. So want to just start off, make sure to put your questions below. I already see some, but we're going to get started. Just, I want to talk a little bit about trends and some predictions over the last year. And you mentioned, kind of some of the symptoms of COVID. How do I know if I lost my taste and smell? Things like that. What other scenarios are there out there that we can kind of, somebody might not be asking a specific question, but things that they might be searching for might lead you to believe that, they're starting a new job or they're going back to school or something like that.
Thankfully, we group a lot of them together. We talked about everything at the search query level. When you start typing some of these things in, so we realize for things like COVID, people may search thousands of different terms, right? COVID, COVID-19, coronavirus. You'll also see as you start typing in, we will start aggregating some of those terms. So that way you can look at some of the broader topics. We'll also surface patterns to say, these are terms that kind of surprise us, and groups and classifications that we didn't expect in particular areas. So we kind of give you that starting point. But generally it comes down just to the language that we use, is to say, we want to look for those differences, really starting category or search term level of the things that interest us, and then to see how it changes. And the way things change is usually phenomenal, but we try to also look at the things we have control over. So it may be difficult to say, okay, well, we're looking at employment. People need jobs. But we also go a little bit further, say, okay, job is a concern. Is it searching for new job opportunities, which is a category, or is it searching for unemployment benefits? What cities and states do we find this to be most prevalent in? Once we find it, we may follow it and say, how is this changing over time? We may find to say, in the areas where unemployment matters, let's correlate it and see how many people are looking also for this particular benefits package. Do we feel like the awareness matches the interest that we're seeing online? And these are all hypotheses and questions. The way the tool is built is you can really search these fairly quickly and easily. But that's kind of the way that we approach the process.
Absolutely. And even just thinking about what you were saying with unemployment, this is also something that governments can use as well, thinking about the tools and benefits that they provide. Of course, unemployment was a very hotly searched topic over the last year and a half. So making sure that you're tracking when your state or your district is going through certain changes and kind of taking into consideration what people are searching, and then how are you matching that on your end? What are you propping up on your website? What are the things that you're surfacing to folks? So I think that's really important. So that leads me into the next question, Neil. You were talking about the query report, and that kind of correlates to Google Trends and the queries that folks are typing in. Why is the language in the query report so important, and why does it matter?
Because people look at things in strange ways. We all have those friends. I'll be honest. I have friends that it's like, I want to go to this website, and they go to Google first and type it in. It's just strange. People do strange things online. What it allows you to do is it allows you to look at how people are understanding or searching for that language. As an example, we use terms with a lot of Google products and services that I promise you nobody outside of Google uses. It's just our products and services. When I joined the company a decade ago, I had to have a notebook just where I wrote down terms. I was like, everyone's saying this. What does that mean? and oftentimes we fall into our own bubbles where we look at things as a certain name, and we use and we reflect that language in our marketing. We use these terms. That's why everyone calls it a shopping cart. We just agree that this is a term in the industry. But sometimes consumers look for something differently, and there can be that mismatch. So somebody may look at it and say, how they define unemployment benefits as an example, just staying on the job subject. They may search for different things than how you're positioning it and putting it on your website. They may not make that connection. And so we see that if you're finding out that a lot of traffic is coming from areas other than what you were trying to focus on, what you thought would bring traffic in, then it allows us to see that gap in language. You'll see what people are searching for, how they're defining it. So it's almost like looking over there at their shoulders or typing in this stuff to say, this is just how they explain their problems. And it allows you to say, is there a mismatch between the language that you're using to present them versus what people are finding you for?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we think about just government jargon and things that we name bills, and, no one is searching in the search engine, oh, how did somebody vote on HR 210.
I will tell you, I was thinking about this as I was presenting that surveys thing. And this, I always get nervous when I present anything in surveys, especially when we polled other industries, because it's not my language, right? I'm saying like HR, that didn't come from me. I'm thinking like house resolution. Yes. And then I start thinking, I'm like, wait, did the numbers reset? I have no idea. I would not serve. And so if that survey question came up and someone's like, have you heard about this house resolution? I'd be like, where are you from? Like, this is not how I look at things. I may have heard about the subject of what you're covering, but this allows us to have that gut check. Because oftentimes when we poll our peers, I poll people in the Google office. My wife works at Google. So even if I ask her for her opinion, I get the Google point of view, the California point of view. A lot of these reports allow us to say, this allows us to get an understanding of what people are looking at elsewhere, how they define their problems, and allows us to shape our language accordingly.
Absolutely. Taking into account what your constituents and your advocates want is something that's extremely important. So Neil, I have a question from Mike here. He's asking, how can I get more trends detail for my own .gov site? Right now, I just see this general link, trends.google.com. Can you explain kind of the difference between trends and where somebody would see some of the analytics for their own site?
Yes. So the trends reports are meant to be available to everyone without limitation, which means you can see anything. The thing that we want to be careful of is, let's say you're Toyota or Starbucks. We can search if people are searching for Toyota and Starbucks, but we wouldn't necessarily reveal what's happening on starbucks.com. We can only look at broader interest for their brand or for their category. We actually have a collection of tools, and I apologize because it has changed names like a dozen times. This is like a thing of Google to rebrand products. It used to be Google Webmaster Tools and then Google Search Console, and now it may be called Google Search Tools. If you search any of those in Google, you'll find the right place. It allows you to set up those reports and get traffic insights just for your domain and for your site. That's also the setup that will feed into Google Analytics to result in the reports that I showed you. But those reports also go into a lot more depth. So if you're really looking and saying, apart from my website, I want to know more about how people are finding me on Google, where I can improve, where I can do better, what signals and data is Google seeing, that collection of tools, the Google search tools, is where you want to start. That's going to give you that connection. Free product, only complication on it is you have to go through a small step to verify ownership of your site. So that way people can't go to your site and see your traffic. It's only yours. But that site is just a few minutes to set up.
Wonderful. And, we hope that people take those steps and can get all the information possible about their website. I have another question here. It's funny that you talk about different terminology and names for different tools. But Julianne asks, is Google Data Studio just a fancy way to display Google Analytics reports? How is this different from the Google Analytics reports? I know Google Data Studio was not mentioned, but I'm curious.
So the Google Data Studio we have not spoken about. The way to look at it's a nice way to display reports, but it has a different perspective. The thing with Google Data, with Data Studio, if you use it, is that it allows you to bring in data from sources beyond Google Analytics. So if you're building a Google Analytics dashboard inside the Google Analytics tool, you're stuck with that data. You're stuck just with your website data. But what if you have a spreadsheet somewhere that tells you to say, look, this is how many, I'm just going to use this, donations we received. Now, we receive those over call centers or through other channels. It didn't happen on my website. Google Analytics does not know about it. Could I build a dashboard that says, here's how much web traffic we received, plus can we also look at the donations that we received over the phone? And could we connect it to our advertising spend data? So what Data Studio does is it allows you to join data from multiple sources together to build those dashboards and reports. Granted, they look a lot nicer than anything in Google Analytics on its own. It's meant to be that way. It's meant to be your data dashboard building product. But it also allows you to bring in information from multiple other sources, full products to individual spreadsheets, so that the report and things that people are looking at is more robust.
Awesome. I think that's super helpful. Neil, I have a sort of a high-level question here in the comments.
Sure.
How do you make sure you remain a diligent analyst?
Ooh, that's a good question. We haven't nailed that internally. We're trying. We have more. We have so many training programs. I'll give you my silly tactic on it. The hardest part for any data analyst is rarely the analysis, the modeling, the handling of data. There's, of course, problems here, right? Clean data sets are a perpetual problem in every industry. The biggest gap that we face is simply sharing those stories and those insights with other audiences. It's very common for us to see people who see 20-page dashboards and scratch their head and say, I don't understand the statistics or the math or the methodology. How do I take what I know and add value in some way to this? And so the skill that I actually suggest a lot of analysts and a lot of teams invest in is in the storytelling aspect of it. One of the best storytellers I work with is a gentleman, Mark Danberg, out of Chicago. He actually does acting as his full-time job. He also does coaching, but he also does acting. Wow. And what's great about him is he does nothing with internet advertising, nothing. And so when I present to him, he's the first layer to say, I have no idea what you're talking about because I'm not in your industry, but can provide that feedback. That is what data analysts miss. Generally, they sit in their bubble. I've been guilty of this as well, where everybody that you work has the same backgrounds and statistics. They understand the tools. What's a goal? I know. What's Google Trends? I know that. And so you take that knowledge for granted. And then you present to other people who aren't going to ask you what it is because maybe they feel silly that they don't know themselves, but your message is lost. And so we spend a lot of time in a purposeful effort saying it's not simply the modeling and the math and the data. Those arguably are becoming easier. But we spend a lot of time saying, how are we going to tell that story in a way that's compelling and provokes action? So again, if this is an area that you're interested in, reach out. I will share any resources or contacts I have. It's still an emerging area, a popular one inside data science, but that's that connection point from a collection of spreadsheets to a story that people remember and that they act on.
Absolutely. Neil, I feel like every time I chat with you, we talk about building relationships and really carrying that story over the finish line. And today I think you painted a beautiful picture of how you can take a tool and really bring it to that personal level and get people engaged and kind of have that two-way communication over just a website or a survey or through Google Trends.
That's my hope.
We love it. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but of course, feel free to reach out to us, civics-outreach@google.com. You can reach out to us. And of course, if you have any questions for Neil, we'd be happy to give those to him as well. He is a plethora of knowledge. He just knows so much about this world and makes it so easy to understand, which I think sometimes can be really difficult when you think about measurement analytics. So Neil, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today. And every time I learn something new. So I really liked the pastries.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. We'll see you back here in July on the 14th, 3 p.m. Eastern time. That's on Thursday, July 14th. And we'll see you next time.